For more on what's happening in Africa, let's go to David Nelson. He is live in New York City. He is the chief strategist at Belpointe Asset Management and investment firm. So, David, let me start with Tillerson's, this is his first visit to the continent as Secretary of State. Foreign Minister Wang Yi usually makes Africa the first major trip of the new year. He's already been there. So I just want to get your thoughts on his recent comments about China's engagement on the continent.
Look, I think, Mr. Tillerson wanted to go there at the request of the president. And admittedly, this is catch-up for this administration. China's been there for a while. And, he's visiting 4 countries, I believe Ethiopia, Nigeria, Chad, and I believe Kenya's on the list as well. But I think what he wanted to point out is they don't want to stop Chinese investment capital going into the region. What I think they'd like to point out is that read the fine print. Some of these loans are predatory in nature, and they're opaque. And easily some of these countries, which are in great turmoil, could lose the sovereignty of some of their infrastructure. Ethiopia just lost its prime minister, resigned last month. The country's been in a state of emergency. There's been corruption, throughout the region. And they're also there for counterterrorism reasons as well. The United States lost 4 American soldiers, 4 special forces soldiers in Nigeria last year. And I think they'd like to address some of those concerns.
Is this also, though, about smoothing ties, as Jim mentioned, following Trump's disparaging remark of people in Africa? Not to mention, there are still a couple of countries on Trump's travel ban: Somalia, Libya, Chad.
I think it's part of that, certainly. But I think there's a bigger issue here. I think increasingly you're going to find China and the United States going head to head. And unfortunately, in many ways, we become adversaries as 2 nations. We have tremendous trade disagreements. The president has asked for a 1/3 cut of the trade deficit, $100 billion. And I think he understands that a trade deficit that large is untenable because it's transfer of wealth. So part of this is all part of that dynamic where we confront each other on geopolitical, economic, and even military reasons around the world.
So it sounds like you're saying that Tillerson is really trying to, be the person who warns Africa against China. But some would also make the point that we didn't really see a lot of engagement from the previous administration, the Obama administration, in Africa as well. So is the U.S. not just playing catch up or, putting these warnings out? Is it also maybe trying to regain any influence there?
I think you're correct. Yeah, I think you make a really good point. We haven't been there. And the only investment that I've seen so far, I believe there's a $533 million investment for humanitarian needs. Obviously a very small sum compared to the amount of money that China's been putting into the region. China's clearly trying to take, to make a major push into Africa. And I think this is really our first stand there. Admittedly, this is catch up at this point.
About 30 seconds left, David. What do you think the bigger picture is for the United States in terms of what it wants with Africa down the line?
I think they'd like to see the country, take a more capitalistic approach. Not the country, I'm sorry, the region, the continent. There's been serious issues throughout Africa for some time. I think they'd like to address some of the geopolitical and terrorism concerns there. But I think they'd also like, they want to be there because China's there. And in many ways, they want to use this as a bargaining chip with other items like tariffs and other things that are, existing between the 2 nations right now.
All right, David Nelson in New York. Always great to see you. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thanks, Elaine.